Okay, so this will allow me to slow down a little bit and not watch the clock and hope I can get in under 15 minutes, but it won't take very long. So we've talked about the Endangered Species Act, and specifically what I'm referring to in this section is this idea of habitat conservation planning. That under Section 7, there is a consultation process where the Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA Fisheries are uh, uh, undergo consultation with other federal agencies and can refuse permits to take actions that may cause harm to endangered species. There is a provision under Section 10 that allows non federal actors to uh, engage in activities that result in the take of threatened wildlife. To have a take as a private party, you need an incidental take permit. And a habitat conservation plan then accompanies this take permit. So the idea that Congress had was that we may not need to save all of the instances of an endangered species, but that there has to be some measure of who gets to do this and why. And so this resulted in developing the idea of a habitat conservation plan. Habitat conservation plans through time have become more formalized, often larger in scale, and have been viewed as a favorable way to do county, city, or regional planning, where a number of landowners may get together and have a regional plan that might include many species. So there are, of course, habitat conservation plans that involve just a single landowner and just single species, but they're really not that common now, and aren't that important, I think, and particularly so not in the West. Uh, but you get these large scale habitat conservation plans now where people will, well, sorry, one of the reasons why it might be a bad idea to have single species, single landowner habitat conservation plans is the idea of cumulative impacts. Is that if, let's say, out of the 22 of us, we all owned the only 22 instances of a particular endangered species, it doesn't seem fair or right to most anybody that uh, 16 of us get to develop our land and get get incidental take permits because that still leaves another five, and the slowest five on the block to put in a plan to develop our property then get subjected to having no take because we happen to be the last ones to ask for permission to destroy some habitat, and therefore it's more critically endangered and we're not allowed. So the idea is to try and get on top of this and provide mitigation for intake of endangered species. And so a habitat conservation plan is supposed to be doing something proactive, may have a mitigation table that says how much land or habitat is going to be set aside as a consequence of destroying some other habitat. So there's always a sort of a net loss going on here, but it is but it can create a plan that protects habitat while allowing others to be developed. And so places that have to go through regional planning, things like counties, might engage in a habitat conservation plan as a measure of developing a build out plan for the next 20 years or so. And if they apply for a habitat conservation plan and it's approved by the federal agency, then it's giving them a take permit, and that means that all decisions on development fall under that plan are permitted and can be self regulated by that local governing authority. And so it basically means that you no longer have to go through the consultation process on every individual development decision. That it puts the local authority in charge of making those decisions. I believe that there's some continued check-in with the federal government and making sure that it's all going well. But it means that it's a regulatory it's a relief from a regulatory burden. So this is a number of large HCPs were ongoing, and what happened is down in San Diego, there was a particularly acute problem of this where developers were trying to develop more and more habitat out from under endangered species, that there was a tremendous number of endangered species, and as a consequence, the cost of putting in a development was going up and up as take permitting became more onerous, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, together with the state and with developers, all got together and said, look, it's okay to cost development money to destroy some habitat in terms of, and they're willing to put up money to save other habitat, other other habitat when some habitat is destroyed. But there needs to be some kind of regulatory certainty that they need to be able to account on fixed costs so they can budget into the projects. And thus was born some California legislation. California is the only state with this, but it's the Natural Community Conservation Planning Act, and that there are now many regions that are falling under a natural community conservation plan. They're often coupled with an HCP, so they're both an NCCP and an HCP. The colored regions on this map are places where there are NCCPs that are either completed or nearing completed. The dark gray areas are ones that are planned. You can see Yolo County there is in yellow. That doesn't mean that we actually have an approved one, but we're pretty far down the pike in having a plan, and it's in effect. Effectively, it just hasn't been signed off on. So these things can actually be terribly long, slow processes, sometimes 15 years in the making. But again, most of Southern California is under the guise of an NCCP. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm for developing these NCCPs early on. It seems to have stalled out a little bit, and that there's not been a lot of new ones, although there are many that are sort of midstream and might be more or less intact, and people are kind of sitting and waiting and seeing how all this goes. But the idea of an NCCP is that you have, and the HCP, you have a variety of named taxa in the plan that have to be accommodated for in development under the geographic region of the HCP or NCCP. And so this is all driven by individual species, but can actually foster a lot of ecosystem management, because the goal is really to protect the habitats and the protect the ecosystems upon which those species depend. Okay, so that's that, and I'll end it, and we'll see you on Thursday.